little bit of a non-verbal day today. Yesterday also. A lot of reflection, a lot of practice. But hey, what we're gonna do now is the last 2 hours of the day. Let's do the last bit of journaling and get back into outreach and lead gen. Let's stop for 1 second. Alright, let me film myself and listen to the podcast that we're going to launch.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into your notes on human behavior and psychology. It seems like you're really on this quest for self-discovery, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. You've provided this really fascinating collection of observations about how our minds work, especially how our experiences, particularly within families, really shape who we become.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. One recurring theme I see again and again is this idea of a blueprint, almost like a personal blueprint that's formed in childhood. It's like this hidden code that influences our values, our decisions, even our relationships.
It's true. And what's really interesting here is the emphasis you've put on the parent whose love felt the most, I guess elusive is the word. You suggest that this dynamic really impacts how our blueprint actually forms.
You know, it's funny, when I went back and was reading through my notes and saw that it really struck a chord with me. It's like we're just instinctively wired to seek out love and acceptance. And then when it feels scarce, we adapt. We come up with these strategies almost to try and earn it.
Exactly. And then those adaptations, those ways of being become so ingrained. Imagine like a child who learns that, expressing their emotions leads to rejection, right? They might start suppressing their feelings just to avoid conflict, carrying that pattern then into adulthood and having these big struggles with vulnerability and things like that.
It's like we're trying to navigate the present using these maps that were drawn in our past, even if those maps are outdated or even like leading us in the wrong direction.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really where those 7 master steps for lasting change that you mentioned in your notes come in. They really provide a framework for recognizing those patterns and then, rewriting that map.
Rewriting the map. I love that. Like we're hitting the refresh button on our internal operating system.
Precisely.
You also highlighted this really intriguing concept of vehicles. Can you talk a little more about what you meant by that?
Yeah. So vehicles are those things that we're always chasing after, right? External things that we start to rely on to fulfill our needs. Like, as an example, someone might use their career as a vehicle to feel significant, to feel valuable.
Right. So it's like almost that thing that we're always striving for.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens when that vehicle breaks down? Yeah. Or when it doesn't lead to the fulfillment that we think it will.
It's like trying to quench your thirst with salt water, right? You think you're addressing the need, but you're actually making it worse. Which makes me think about those 6 core needs that you mentioned in your notes. I think those are crucial to this whole conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Because your notes don't explicitly list all of the needs, but the implication is there. Unmet needs can fuel so much of our internal struggle and conflict. It's like we have this primal urge for security, connection, significance, and when those needs aren't met, it creates this ripple effect throughout everything. Our relationships, our careers, even our physical health.
Okay, so we've got this blueprint, we've got these vehicles, these needs. You also highlighted wounds in your notes too.
Yeah.
Like emotional wounds from childhood. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, and you noted several different types: abandonment, betrayal, criticism. And each one can really leave its mark, shaping the way that we see things and how we navigate the world.
Like those wounds create these blind spots, right?
They do.
Making us more sensitive to certain things, even if we're not really aware of why.
Right, exactly.
Like it's this subconscious thing that's always there.
Yeah.
So how do we break free? How do we break free from these cycles? How do we heal those wounds and start living, authentically?
And that's where those 7 master steps become really essential, because they offer that roadmap for understanding our wounds, challenging our beliefs, and then ultimately, rewriting those blueprints that we've been talking about for greater fulfillment.
Okay, this is already blowing my mind a little bit. We have a lot to unpack here. So let's start with those 7 steps. What's the first step? How can it help us understand these patterns that we keep repeating, often without even realizing it?
So the first step is really just about understanding your world, right? It's about shining a light on those unconscious patterns, those beliefs that are really driving everything, your thoughts, your feelings, even your behaviors.
It's like becoming an explorer, but of our own inner landscape, right? Like mapping out the terrain so we can navigate it more effectively.
That's a great way to put it. And this exploration really often starts with understanding that blueprint that we were just talking about. Going back to that dynamic that you were talking about earlier with the parent whose love felt the most difficult to earn. What messages did you internalize from that relationship looking back?
Thinking back on it, I can see how that one relationship really shaped what I believed about myself in a lot of ways. About, being worthy, being lovable. It's like I learned to equate receiving love with what I achieved. So I was constantly striving, constantly trying to prove myself.
And how do you think that pattern is showing up in your life today? In your relationships, in your career, in your relationship with yourself even?
Wow, that's a really powerful question. I can see how that old pattern of seeking validation from others, it's still there. Even though it's not really serving me anymore, it's definitely still there.
And that's exactly why this first step is so crucial, right? Because by becoming aware of these patterns, these blueprints that were handed to us, we can start to question them. We can challenge them, challenge their hold on us and our decisions, and ultimately we can choose something different, choose a different path for ourselves.
So it's not about blaming our parents or the past, really. It's about taking responsibility.
Exactly.
For our own growth, for our own healing.
It's about recognizing that while our past experiences have shaped us, they don't define us. We have the power to choose a different story for ourselves, to create a future that's more aligned with who we really are. And that's a powerful realization, isn't it? This idea that we have agency, that we can choose a different path.
Absolutely. But it's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually start breaking free from those deeply ingrained patterns?
Well, that's where the next step comes in, leveraging our motivation. You touched on this in your notes as well, especially the idea of using both positive and negative motivators to fuel change.
Right, like sometimes it's the fear of something negative happening that finally pushes us to make a change.
Precisely. And that's perfectly valid. It's about understanding what truly motivates us, what gets us fired up, even if it's not always, pretty or positive. It's about being honest with ourselves.
Yeah, totally. So it's not about denying our fears or insecurities, but about acknowledging them and then using them as fuel for growth. That makes me think of those 6 core needs we were talking about earlier. How do they play into all of this?
Ah, yes, those core needs. Remember, your notes imply that unmet needs are often at the root of so many of our struggles. It's like these needs are fundamental to our well-being, and when they're neglected, it creates this ripple effect throughout our lives.
Okay, so let's explore those needs a bit further. I'm really curious to see how they connect to these patterns we've been discussing.
Absolutely. Let's start with security. We all crave safety, stability, a sense of grounding in the world. It's a primal need.
And that makes total sense. When we feel secure, we can relax, open up, and thrive. But when that need is threatened, we go into survival mode.
Exactly. And your blueprint, shaped by those early experiences, might dictate how you seek that security. Some might seek it through external validation, constantly striving for approval, while others might withdraw, building walls to protect themselves from potential hurt.
So it's like we each have our own unique strategy for navigating the world based on what we've learned about safety and security.
Precisely. And that strategy might have served you well in childhood, but it can become a limiting belief in adulthood, preventing you from experiencing true intimacy and connection.
That's a really good point. It's like those old coping mechanisms, while well-intentioned, can actually sabotage our efforts to create the very things we crave.
Exactly. Which is why it's so important to bring awareness to these patterns, to understand how our past experiences might be shaking our present reality.
Okay, so security is a big one. What other core needs should we be aware of?
Well, connection is another powerful one, that deep-seated longing for belonging, for intimacy, for love. We are social creatures at our core.
Absolutely. We crave those meaningful connections with others.
And yet our blueprint might influence how we seek that connection. Some might crave constant attention and affirmation, fearing that without it they'll be abandoned or forgotten. Others might equate vulnerability with weakness, keeping their hearts guarded to avoid potential hurt.
It's like we're all trying to solve the same puzzle, but with different pieces and strategies. And sometimes those strategies, while well-intentioned, can actually sabotage our efforts to create fulfilling relationships.
Exactly. We might push away the very connection we crave because we're afraid of being hurt, rejected, or abandoned.
Which makes me think about those wounds we discussed earlier, Those emotional scars from childhood can play a significant role in how we approach relationships.
Absolutely. For instance, if someone experienced a deep betrayal in their childhood, perhaps from a caregiver who wasn't emotionally present, that wound might manifest as a fear of intimacy or difficulty trusting others.
It's like that old wound gets reactivated in adult relationships, creating a kind of self-sabotaging loop.
Precisely. And often we're not even consciously aware of this pattern. It's operating beneath the surface, driving our decisions and reactions.
So how do we break free from that? How do we heal those old wounds and start creating healthier, more fulfilling relationships?
That's where those 7 master steps become so essential. They provide a framework for understanding our wounds, challenging those limiting beliefs, and ultimately creating a new blueprint for our relationships.
Okay, so we've talked about security and connection. What are the other core needs that are influencing our behaviors and shaping our experiences?
Well, another significant one is significance, that desire to feel important, valued, respected. We all want to feel like our lives have meaning and that we're making a difference.
That resonates deeply. It's like that innate drive to contribute, to leave our mark on the world.
Exactly. And yet, our blueprints might dictate how we seek that significance. Some might chase achievements, accolades, external validation, while others might shy away from the spotlight, feeling like they're not good enough or that their contributions don't matter.
It's like some of us are wired to overachieve, while others are wired to underachieve, both stemming from that same core need for significance.
Oh, precisely. And often it's those early experiences, those messages we internalized in childhood that shape those patterns.
This is making me realize how much of our behavior is driven by these unconscious needs and beliefs. It's like we're all walking around with these hidden scripts, and we don't even realize we're following them.
Exactly. And that's why self-awareness is so crucial. The more we understand those scripts, those blueprints, the more power we have to rewrite them.
Okay, so we've covered security, connection, and significance. What are the other core needs we should be aware of?
Well, variety is a big one. We all have this innate need for novelty, for excitement, for new experiences. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly alive, truly engaged? It probably involves some element of novelty or challenge.
That's a really good point. It's like we're wired to seek out new experiences, to expand our horizons.
Exactly. And yet, if that need for variety isn't met in healthy ways, it can manifest in more destructive behaviors, like constantly seeking the next thrill or jumping from relationship to relationship without ever truly committing.
It's like we're trying to outrun our own emptiness. But true fulfillment comes from within, not from external pursuits.
Precisely. And that brings us to the next core need, growth. This is the need to learn, to expand, to evolve as individuals. We are not meant to stay stagnant.
That one's close to my heart. I'm definitely someone who thrives on learning new things, exploring new ideas, and challenging myself to grow.
And that's fantastic. When we nurture that need for growth, it can lead to incredible personal fulfillment. But when it's stifled, when we feel stuck or stagnant, it can lead to feelings of frustration, emptiness, and even depression.
It's like we're wired to evolve, and when we resist that natural impulse, we suffer.
Exactly. Which brings us to the final core need, contribution. This is the need to make a difference, to give back to the world, to leave it a better place than we found it.
This one's powerful. It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves, about using our unique gifts and talents to serve others.
Precisely. And that sense of contribution, of making a meaningful difference, can be incredibly fulfilling. It gives our lives a sense of purpose and direction.
So when we're living in alignment with these 6 core needs, security, connections, significance, variety, growth, and contribution, we're more likely to experience true happiness and fulfillment. It's like all the pieces of the puzzle finally click into place.
Exactly. But here's the thing, and this is where the blueprint comes back into play. We often develop strategies for meeting these needs in childhood that might not serve us well in adulthood.
So someone who learned to seek security through control might end up in relationships that feel suffocating. Or someone who equates significance with material possessions might find themselves constantly chasing the next big thing, never feeling truly satisfied.
Precisely. The key is to become aware of those patterns, those deeply ingrained beliefs and behaviors that are no longer serving us, and to consciously choose a different path.
And that's where those 7 master steps for lasting change come in, right? They provide a framework for transforming those old limiting patterns into empowering new ones.
Exactly. It's about rewriting the blueprint, creating a life that's in greater alignment with your deepest needs and desires.
It's like we're taking all of this amazing information we've uncovered about ourselves, our blueprints, our wounds, our core needs, and we're using it to create a new roadmap for our lives, one that leads to greater fulfillment, joy, and purpose.
Precisely. It's about stepping into our power as conscious creators of our own reality.
This is incredibly empowering, but I have to admit, it can also feel a bit overwhelming. Where do we even begin?
You're right, it can feel like a lot to process. But remember, it's a journey, not a race. And like any journey, it begins with a single step.
And that first step is understanding our world, right? Shining the light on those unconscious patterns and beliefs that are driving our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Exactly. It's about becoming aware of the forces that have shaped us so that we can start to make conscious choices about who we want to be and how we want to show up in the world.
This is incredibly powerful stuff. But before we dive deeper into those 7 master steps, let's take a quick pause. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Just kidding, we know you're hooked. And we're back. You know, it's amazing what we can uncover when we really take the time to go deep on these fundamental pieces of ourselves, like who we are at our core.
Yeah, it is remarkable, isn't it? All those blueprints, the wounds, the core needs, it's like they all weave together to make us who we are.
Totally. And speaking of threads, I keep seeing language patterns pop up in my notes too, and I think it's time we finally unpack that a bit.
Yes, language patterns are so fascinating because they really reveal how the way we talk to ourselves and others can either keep reinforcing those old blueprints or help us create brand new ones. It's powerful stuff.
So it's not just about what we're saying, it's how we're saying it.
Exactly. It's both. The words we use, they have so much power. They can uplift us or tear us down, empower us or keep us stuck. It really runs the gamut.
This actually makes me think about those 7 master steps for lasting change that we were talking about earlier. I'm wondering, how do these language patterns, how do they play into each of those steps?
That's a great observation. I mean, language patterns are woven into all of it, really. They can really support our journey every step of the way.
Perfect. So let's start with step 1 then, understanding our world. How can changing our language patterns actually help us with that initial step of self-awareness?
Okay, so think about it this way. Our thoughts, they're constantly shaping our reality, right? And how do we express those thoughts? Language. It's how we communicate them to ourselves in the world.
So if someone is constantly engaging in this negative self-talk, they're basically confirming all those negative beliefs just by saying them out loud.
It's like they're subconsciously writing this script for their lives, and it's all based on limitation and self-sabotage. And this is important, we can rewrite that script.
Wait, so just by changing our language?
Exactly. By becoming aware of that negative self-talk and then consciously choosing more empowering language, we can shift our mindset and start creating a totally different reality for ourselves.
Can you give me an example? What does that look like in real life?
Okay, so let's say someone always puts themselves down. They're saying, I'm not good enough, all the time. That's just feeding those negative beliefs. So what if instead of putting so much energy into their flaws, they focus on their strengths instead?
So instead of saying, I'm not good enough, it's like, okay, maybe I'm still learning and growing, but I'm proud of how far I've come. Something like that.
Exactly. It's such a subtle shift, but just by changing the language, they're changing their focus, their energy. It's replacing that old story with a new and more empowering one.
Wow. This is really making me realize how much power we have over our own minds. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like we've been given this incredible tool language and we can use it to build ourselves up or tear ourselves down. It's up to us.
I know, it's kind of mind-blowing. And honestly, the more aware we become of the language we're using, the easier it is to choose the words that uplift us, that inspire us, the words that support our growth.
Okay, this is so empowering. I love it. So we've talked about how important language is to understanding our world. But what about step 2, leveraging our motivation? How does that work?
Well, remember how we were talking about how fear can be a huge motivator for people?
Yes. Sometimes it's the fear of something bad happening that finally gets us to make a change, like a real kick in the pants.
Exactly. And we can use our language to either make that fear even bigger, or we can reframe it into something that empowers us.
Can you give me an example?
Totally. Let's say someone is terrified of public speaking, like completely terrified. If they just focus on everything that could go wrong, what if people judge me? What if I forget what I'm going to say? That fear is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and they're going to totally freeze up on stage if they keep thinking that way.
For sure. But what if instead of dwelling on the worst case scenario, they change their perspective a bit? What if they decide to be excited about it instead of afraid? It's a chance to share their message with the world, connect with people, make a difference.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. I like that.
Totally. And language can make that shift happen. Instead of saying, I'm so scared of public speaking, it's, I'm excited to share my ideas. I'm excited to connect with people.
So just by changing the language, they're changing how they feel. They're turning fear into excitement.
Exactly. And that change in their emotional state, that can make all the difference in how they perform and what it feels like for them to get up there.
This is so cool. It's like we can literally reframe our fears just by choosing our words more carefully.
We can. And this applies to any area of our lives where we feel held back by fear, whether it's relationships, fear of failure, anything. We can use language to change our perspective and step into our power.
Okay, this is truly transformative stuff. Okay, on to step 3. Interrupting the pattern. How can language patterns help us with that? Breaking free from the thought patterns and habits that aren't working for us anymore.
Those blueprint beliefs that we were talking about before, the ones that often come from those childhood experiences.
Right, like I'm not worthy of love or I'm not good enough. Those limiting beliefs that we carry around.
Yes, exactly. Language can help us challenge those beliefs. When we can call them out for what they are, just thoughts, it's easier to see that they aren't necessarily true.
Okay, so if someone really struggles with feeling like they're not worthy of love, maybe they need to start asking themselves, what evidence do I have to back this up? Is this even true, or is this just a story I've been telling myself for years?
Exactly. And by questioning the beliefs, shining a light on them, they start to lose their grip on us a little,
Like we're deflating them, taking away their power.
Exactly. And as those beliefs lose their power, the patterns they create lose their power too. It opens us up to believing new things that serve us better.
I love that. It's like we have the power to rewrite the code of our own minds. And it sounds like language is the key to making that happen.
It is. It really all comes back to language.
Okay, I'm ready for step 4, clearly defining the problem. How do language patterns play into this?
So clearly defining the problem means getting really specific about what's going on. It's about reframing our challenges so they feel solvable, more empowering. And language is what helps us do that reframing.
Okay, can I get an example of this too?
Of course. So let's say someone is always procrastinating. Instead of just saying, ugh, I'm so lazy, what if they said, I'm having some trouble managing my time? It's a different way of looking at the problem.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The first one is just a judgment, a label that makes you feel bad. But the second one, it's like, okay, here's the problem, and now let's figure out how to fix it.
Exactly. They've reframed the problem, and now it feels more solvable. Now they can explore different time management techniques, break things down into smaller steps, ask for help from someone. The possibilities open up.
They've gone from passive victim to active problem solver.
Yes. And that shift, it's often because of the language they're choosing to use.
This is so helpful. I can think of so many times when I've used language that makes me feel stuck instead of empowered to find a solution.
It's a common pattern, but we can definitely change it if we're willing to put in the effort. The more we pay attention to the words we use and choose the ones that empower us, the more we can transform how we approach problems and start getting the results that we want.
Love it. This is amazing. Okay, step 5, empowering alternatives. What do we need to know about that?
Step 5 is all about exploring and experimenting with new beliefs and behaviors that are aligned with the life we want to create. And language is so important here because it helps us paint a really clear picture of that desired future, making it feel more real and possible.
So if someone's trying to be more loving toward themselves, they might come up with some positive affirmations to repeat every day. Things that really highlight their strengths and worthiness, almost like they're trying to reprogram their subconscious mind with new beliefs.
Yes, exactly. They can also use language to really visualize their ideal self. Imagine them acting and feeling in ways that reflect that self-love they're trying to cultivate.
So it's like creating this mental movie of their dream future, using language to make it come alive.
That's a great way to put it. And the more vivid and emotionally charged that movie is, the more likely it is to actually manifest in their life. Our minds are powerful.
This is powerful stuff. It's like we really can use language to tap into that creative part of our imaginations and change our reality.
It can. And this can work in any area of our lives where we're craving change, whether it's our health, relationships, careers. Language can help us close the gap between where we are now and where we want to be.
Okay, so if someone wants to find a loving partner, they can use language to help them do that.
Yes. They can visualize their perfect relationship, imagine what it feels like to be happy and connected and fulfilled.
Because by putting their energy and focus into those positive feelings, they're more likely to attract those experiences into their lives.
Precisely.
This is so inspiring. It's like we can create this magnet for positivity just with the things we say.
I love that. That's a great way to think of it. And the more we cultivate those positive emotions, the more we attract people who resonate with those same vibes.
Okay, we're on to step 6. Conditioning for success. What is that?
Conditioning for success is all about reinforcing those positive changes, making sure they actually stick. And the language we use plays a huge role in that.
So someone is trying to break free from that negative self-talk. Maybe they could surround themselves with positive affirmations instead. Write them down and put them all over the house as little reminders throughout the day.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get your friends and family involved too. Ask them to help hold you accountable to using more positive, empowering language.
It's like we're creating this positive feedback loop just with the words we use.
Yes. And the more we can reinforce those positive patterns, the more they become ingrained in us. We're training our brains to think and feel differently.
I love that. This is so empowering. Okay, we made it to the final step, aligning with purpose. How can we use language to connect with something bigger than ourselves?
Think of aligning with purpose as finding that thing in your life that gives you meaning and direction. It's about making sure your actions match your values and your dreams for your life. And language helps us articulate what that purpose is. It gives it a voice.
So if someone is really passionate about the environment, for example, they might write down a mission statement that clearly defines their goals, and they'll use language that inspires them and motivates them to take action.
Exactly. And they can share their purpose with other people. Use their words to inspire others to care about it too.
It's like creating this ripple effect of positive change just by talking about it.
Yes. And that's what it's all about, right? When we're living in alignment with our purpose and we share that with others, it gives us this energy and motivation we didn't have before. Things that used to feel impossible suddenly feel possible.
It's like we're finally living as our most authentic selves.
Yes. And that feeling, that sense of purpose.
Bit corny towards the end.
It can change our lives, and it can change the lives of those around us too. We inspire each other to be better, to live more authentically. It's amazing.
Wow. This has been such an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing all of these insights with me and with our listeners.
Of course, it's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope you'll spend some time reflecting on what really resonated with you today. What kind of patterns have you noticed in your own life? What steps can you take, no matter how big or small, to move toward that greater fulfillment you're looking for? And remember, this journey of self-discovery, it never really ends. Every step you take, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction. Until next time, keep on diving deep.
Absolutely incredible, man. Let's see if there's any good. Inner conflicts.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to explore what makes us tick?
Always excited to dive into these fascinating topics.
Me too. And today we're really going deep, folks, with these excerpts from the CLC Journal.
It's amazing, really, full of stories and techniques that just challenge how we see ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly, like we're getting this insider's look at human behavior, but not just from a textbook, from real stories.
It's almost like therapy in action,
Right. So much of what we see out there is about labeling people, judging their actions as good or bad. But this journal,
It goes deeper.
yeah, it's all about understanding the why behind the what.
Precisely. It's not about judging actions as good or bad, but rather understanding the deeper needs and motivations behind them.
Okay, so it's about understanding the why, but how does that work in practice? Like the journal talks about this parts intervention thing.
That's where things get really interesting. It's like Imagine different parts of your personality, almost like characters within you, each with their own voice and motivations.
Okay, like an inner
Exactly. There's the good girl, the rebel, the inner critic, all those voices we have in our heads. And parts intervention. It's like having a conversation with these different parts to understand their roles in your life.
So instead of feeling like you're fighting yourself, battling those voices,
It becomes about understanding them.
working with them. I like it.
And you might be surprised to find that even the parts that seem negative actually have positive intentions.
Really. Even like the inner critic that's always telling us we're not good enough.
Even that one, it's usually trying to protect you in some way, even if it's misguided. Maybe it's trying to motivate you to do better or avoid past hurts.
Dude!
Wow, that's a new way to think about it. It's like these parts are trying to help us, just not always going about it in the best way.
Exactly. They're doing their best with the information they have.
This is already blowing my mind. Can I get into a story? See how this actually works in someone's life?
Let's talk about Suki.
Suki. All right, what's her story?
So she's described as this high achiever, successful on the outside, checking all the boxes, but struggling to experience genuine joy. Like she's living by a script, but it's not the one that brings happiness.
Ooh, yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of going through the motions, but still feeling like something's missing.
Right. Like you're achieving, but not really living.
So what's going on with Suki? What's the why behind her story?
Well, the therapist uncovers this dominant good girl part that emerged in her childhood. Seems it was a way to navigate a difficult relationship with her father.
Ah, so even from a young age, we're creating these coping mechanisms, these parts, to deal with our environment.
We're incredibly adaptable beings, aren't we?
And while these parts can be super helpful, even crucial for survival, it sounds like they can also create these roadblocks later in life, especially if we're not aware of them.
Exactly. We become so used to operating from these old patterns that we don't even realize they're no longer serving us.
So how did the therapist work with Suki's good girl part?
He actually had her talk to it directly, asking questions like, what do you need? What are you afraid of?
Hold on. So he had her have a conversation with this part of herself.
You got it. Giving a voice to that inner character.
Wow. And what happened?
Through that dialogue, Suki realizes that her good girl, while seemingly positive, is actually driven by a fear of failure and a need for approval. Which makes sense, right? Given her childhood experiences.
It's like her past is still driving her present, even if she's not aware of it.
And it's keeping her stuck in a cycle of perfectionism that's ultimately robbing her of joy.
Okay, so that's powerful stuff. It's like uncovering a hidden script running in the background of our lives. But the big question is, how do you change that script?
That's where things get really transformative. The therapist guides Suki to connect with another part, a part he calls her passion.
Passion. I like the sound of that.
Right. And this part represents her authentic self, her deepest desires and dreams, the things that light her up.
So it's about identifying and embracing those parts of ourselves that we might have pushed aside or silenced.
Exactly. And this is where the real transformation begins for Suki. He helps her see how embracing her passion could bring more joy and fulfillment into her life, even if it means challenging the good girl's need for safety and control.
So it's not about getting rid of the good girl altogether. It's about finding a balance.
Exactly. It's about creating a more harmonious relationship between all the different parts of ourselves.
That's incredible. I'm already hooked on Suki's story, but I know the journal also mentions a woman named Lisa. What can you tell us about her?
Lisa's story dives into the profound impact of early childhood experiences and how they can shape our behavior patterns. She grew up with a strict father.
Well, that can definitely leave its mark.
Absolutely. And as a result, she learned to suppress her emotions, adopting a more, how should I put it, masculine energy to cope.
It sounds like she learned to armor up to protect herself emotionally.
Exactly. And while that armor might have been necessary at the time, it's now preventing her from fully connecting with her femininity and experiencing true vulnerability.
It's amazing to me how these patterns we develop in childhood can follow us into adulthood, even if we're not consciously aware of them.
They become so ingrained, so automatic that we don't even realize they're there until something happens that forces us to confront them. It really highlights how adaptable we are, right? Like how we create these ways of coping to navigate tough situations early on, but then sometimes those exact mechanisms trip us up later down the line.
Totally. So we're seeing the why behind Suki's drive for achievement and Lisa's difficulty with being vulnerable. But how do you actually change something so deeply rooted? Like the journal mentions reframing.
Reframing, yeah. It's powerful. You take a belief that's causing someone pain or holding them back, and you basically help them see it through a totally different lens.
Got any examples from the journal?
Absolutely. There's a story about a woman named Patricia who's really struggling with anxiety and fear, especially when it comes to her boss. She's convinced she's going to be stuck in this worry loop forever.
Oof, I've been there.
Right. It's the worst. But instead of just agreeing with her fear, the therapist, he does something unexpected.
What do you do?
He says something like, imagine yourself 32 years from now, still consumed by this worry. What a waste of a life that would be. It's like, whoa.
That's calling it like it is.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be a wake-up call for Patricia.
Right. He's raising the stakes, helping her see the cost of holding on to this fear, and then he takes it even further and reframes the whole situation.
How so?
He suggests that maybe, just maybe, her boss's behavior isn't about her at all, but about his own unmet needs. Like maybe he's craving freedom or love.
Wow, that's a huge mind shift. It's not about blaming the boss, but it's not about Patricia taking it all personally either. It's about looking at the bigger picture, the deeper dynamics going on.
And that understanding, that space between you and the story you're telling yourself, it can be incredibly liberating.
So it's recognizing that sometimes the way we're interpreting a situation, the stories we tell ourselves, can keep us stuck.
100%. And this whole idea of reframing, of shifting perspectives, it's a recurring theme in the journal.
I bet. It seems like such a versatile tool.
It really is. He uses a similar approach with Lisa. Remember her? Stuck in that pattern of over-controlling her relationships.
Right, stemming from those experiences with her father in childhood.
Exactly. Learning to suppress her emotions and lead with that, masculine energy. So the therapist helps Lisa see that her need for control isn't about being bossy. It's actually a form of fear.
Fear of.
Fear of not being loved or respected if she's not the one calling the shots. And that fear, ironically, is leading her to recreate the exact dynamic she's trying to avoid. It's like, ouch, that's gotta hurt.
It's like she's pushing people away without even realizing it, just by trying to hold on too tight.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how the therapist then uses Lisa's love for her son as a motivator for change.
Okay, how does that work?
He guides her to imagine herself in her son's shoes and to see how her patterns might impact his future relationships.
So it's not just about personal transformation. It's about the ripple effects our patterns have on those we love, especially our kids. That's huge.
And effective. The journal mentions that this really clicked with Lisa. It became bigger than just her. It was about wanting something different, something better for her son.
That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of connecting with values, what about Jessica's story? Remember, she was using sadness to get her needs met, which wasn't doing her marriage any favors.
Yeah.
How does the therapist handle that?
This is where his ability to connect with people on a deeper level really shines through. He gently and compassionately helps Jessica see that while what she wants, love and attention, are totally valid, her actions are having the opposite effect.
Pushing her husband and children away instead of drawing them closer?
Exactly. It's like, ouch, that's a tough pill to swallow. To realize you're unknowingly sabotaging the very thing you want most.
Absolutely. But it's also a turning point. So what happens? How does he help her bridge that gap?
This is where it gets really interesting. Knowing that Jessica is a spiritual person, he asks her, do you believe in God? What do you think God wants us to be or do with our lives? Punish people.
Wow, he's not shying away from the big questions.
Not at all. He's meeting her where she is, using her faith to help her see things from a fresh perspective. He's not telling her what to believe. He's guiding her to connect with her own values.
I love that. And to see that real fulfillment, lasting joy, it comes from a different place than she's been looking.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not about perpetuating those cycles of pain and punishment, but about choosing love and contribution as your guiding principles.
It's like he's reframing her relationship with her own faith.
Exactly.
Helping her see it as a source of strength and empowerment instead of something that's being used to justify her sadness.
Exactly. He's helping her tap into the power of her own beliefs to create a more positive and fulfilling reality for herself and her family. And what's really interesting is that the therapist doesn't just stop at these conversations, these aha moments.
There's more. What else does he do?
He gives his clients homework.
Homework. Like actual assignments.
Yeah. But not what you'd expect. It's not about reading chapters or writing essays. It's more like experiments encourage little nudges to step outside their comfort zones.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what kind of experiments are we talking about here?
Well, remember Jessica, stuck in that pattern of using sadness to connect with her family.
Yeah, and how the therapist helped her tap into her faith as this source of strength and love.
Right. So building on that, he gives her this, well, unconventional homework assignment.
Hit me. What's the assignment?
He tells her to focus on her husband's pleasure.
Wait, really? I gotta be honest, that sounds a little, outside the box.
It does, right. But here's the thing. In the context of their sessions, it totally makes sense. It's not about what you might be thinking. It's about helping Jessica shift her focus from her own needs to her husband's.
Oh, I see. To break free from that me pattern and step into a more giving, loving space in her marriage.
Exactly. To actually put those values of love and generosity into action, not just talk about them.
Brilliant.
And how did that go over? I mean, it sounds like it could go either way.
The journal notes say it was a game changer for her. It wasn't easy by any means, but it forced her to show up differently in her marriage.
To choose a different path. It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. Or in this case, be the change you want to see in your relationship.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of these homework assignments. They're all about shaking things up, challenging those old tapes that are playing in our heads, and giving people a taste of what's possible when they step outside those comfort zones.
I love that. So we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. It's amazing how much richness there is in these stories, these real-life examples. As we start to wrap up here, what are some key takeaways our listeners can walk away with today? What can they really use in their own lives?
You know, the biggest one for me is this. We are not our patterns. We are so much more than our past experiences, our insecurities, our fears. We have a choice in how we let those patterns shape us.
We have the power to rewrite the script. I love that.
Yes. We can reframe our beliefs, choose a different ending to our story. It all starts with awareness, though.
Becoming aware of the patterns, understanding where they came from, and seeing how they might be holding us back.
Exactly. And then, with a little curiosity and a whole lot of compassion, we can start to work with those parts of ourselves, challenge them, reframe them, and choose a different path.
And sometimes that path leads us to some pretty interesting places. Unconventional homework assignments, tough conversations with ourselves, but hey, that's where the good stuff happens, right?
Absolutely. Outside that comfort zone is where the magic is, where the real growth and transformation takes place. It's a journey worth taking.
It absolutely is. This has been an incredible deep dive, so many thought-provoking ideas. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Until next time, remember, keep asking why, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deep. Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Ever feel like,
You've got a whole committee in your head,
and they can't agree on where to eat?
let alone the big life choices.
We're diving into inner conflict today with this source.
What's a self-help book?
What's fascinating is how this source breaks down conflict systematically.
More like a field guide to the inner battlefields of our minds.
It's not just, I want this, but I should do that.
It's about the interplay of our needs.
Values, even the energy, physical, emotional, mental, that we're running on at any given moment.
Okay, so less about silencing the peanut gallery in our heads.
More about understanding why they're each shouting different advice.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think of it like this.
You stumble across a hidden chamber in an ancient temple.
This source is like the archaeologist's journal.
All right, that was not enough context. This is good to know. Give it precisely, really good context. Delete that. Remove. Beliefs. Man. You got to give it a lot of context. Yeah, man, there's something in there. Oh, this is brilliant. This is just really good. Wow. another episode here. Actually, how does it sound with like the healing music in the background? Let's see.
Hey there, and welcome back for another deep dive. You know, we love getting to the core of things, and today is no exception.
Nope.
We are diving deep into the fascinating world of belief change.
That's right.
Have you ever wondered why you believe what you believe and how to actually shift those deeply ingrained thoughts?
It's a journey we all go on, right? And we're going to unpack some insightful notes from someone who seems to have spent a lot of time thinking about how we form beliefs, and maybe even more importantly, how we can change them.
It's like we're about to unlock a treasure chest of techniques for understanding the mind.
Yeah.
One of the things that really jumped out at me was the emphasis on the connection between our emotions and our beliefs.
Yeah, it's like that gut feeling you get, right? We often talk about having a sense about something.
Right.
This suggests that our emotions play a huge role in shaping what we believe to be true.
It reminds me of that feeling you get when you walk into a room and instantly sense the energy, even if you can't quite put it into words.
Exactly. Our intuition speaks volumes, often through our emotions. These notes suggest that if we want to understand a belief, we need to trace it back to its emotional roots. It's about uncovering the why behind the what.
So, for example, if someone constantly doubts their abilities and believes they're not good enough, that belief might stem from a childhood experience where their efforts weren't acknowledged or valued.
Precisely. That early experience might have created an emotional imprint that continues to influence their beliefs and behaviors even years later. They might even shy away from opportunities or downplay their accomplishments, subconsciously reinforcing that old belief.
It's like those beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies. That's where this whole idea of secondary gain comes in, right? The notes mention that sometimes we hold on to beliefs, even if they cause us pain or hold us back, because there's some sort of hidden benefit.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It's almost counterintuitive.
It is. It's like someone who claims they're too busy to pursue their passions. That busyness, while maybe stressful, might actually be a way to protect themselves from the fear of failure or judgment.
Wow, that's a really powerful insight. It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion here, getting to the heart of why we believe what we believe. So how do we start to challenge and change these deep-seated beliefs? Because it feels like some of them are so ingrained, so automatic.
Absolutely. And these notes offer a variety of techniques. One that comes up again and again is the idea of reframing.
Reframing. I've heard that term before, but how does it apply to our beliefs?
Think of it like this. You have a picture, and you decide to put it in a different frame. The picture itself stays the same, but the new frame can completely change how you see it, right?
That's a great analogy. It helps make it more tangible.
Exactly. And with beliefs, it's about shifting your perspective, looking at the same situation or thought through a new lens. For instance, instead of saying, I'm not good at this, you might reframe it as, I'm still learning and growing in this area. It's a subtle shift, but it can have a huge impact.
It's like giving yourself permission to be a work in progress, to embrace the journey of growth and learning.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, there was also this intriguing section in the notes about mirror principles.
Yes.
It sounds pretty profound.
It is a powerful concept. It essentially suggests that the things we react strongly to in others often reflect something within ourselves.
You mean like if I'm constantly annoyed by people who are always late, it might be because deep down I have a fear of being out of control. Control or disappointing others.
Precisely. The notes propose that we can use these mirrors as incredible tools for self-awareness. It's like these reflections are offering us valuable clues about our own beliefs and patterns, nudging us to explore those aspects of ourselves that might need attention and transformation.
That's amazing. It's like our interactions with others can be these incredible opportunities for growth and self-discovery if we know how to look at them. Now, these notes you have are full of so many fascinating tools and techniques. It's like a toolbox for the mind. Is there anything else that stood out to you that we should dive into?
Absolutely. There's this whole section about using conversational techniques as a way to gently and effectively shift beliefs. Are you ready to explore that?
Absolutely. Let's unravel the art of conversation as a tool for personal transformation. So where it gets really interesting.
These conversational techniques are fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like turning a casual chat into a powerful tool for transformation.
Right.
The notes emphasize asking questions that encourage you to examine the evidence behind your beliefs.
It's like putting those beliefs on trial, right?
Exactly.
Cross-examining them to see if they hold up under scrutiny.
Yes.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is you're not trying to force yourself to believe something different overnight.
Right.
It's about gentle inquiry, about
Yeah.
creating a space for curiosity and exploration.
So what kind of questions might we ask ourselves or others when we're trying to shift a belief? Give us some examples.
One powerful question is simply, is that always true? For example, if you're holding on to the belief, I'm not good at relationships, asking yourself, is that always true, can help you uncover exceptions to the rule.
Right. Because there are always exceptions. There might be certain relationships where someone thrives even if they've had challenges in other areas of their life.
Precisely. And by focusing on those exceptions, you start to chip away at the belief's hold on you. Another powerful question is, what if the opposite were true?
Oh, I like that one. It's like flipping the script. So instead of, I'll never find my dream job, it becomes, what if I'm just one step away from landing my dream job?
Exactly. It opens up your thinking to possibilities you might not have considered otherwise.
Yeah.
And sometimes just by asking that question, you start to see things differently. You begin to notice opportunities that were always there, but you couldn't see them because you were so focused on the limiting belief.
It's like those beliefs can create blind spots, can't they? They prevent us from seeing the bigger picture, the possibilities that surround us.
Absolutely. And these conversational techniques act like little cracks in the armor of those limiting beliefs. They let the light shine through.
Well, like that.
The notes also mention using humor and metaphors in these conversations.
Sure.
It's about making it fun, engaging, and relatable.
It's true. People are more receptive to new ideas when they don't feel like they're being lectured to. It's about creating a safe and supportive space for exploration and growth.
Exactly. And speaking of creating a space for growth, there's a fascinating technique in here about changing the relationship you have with a belief, particularly one that's causing you distress.
Okay, this sounds intriguing. How do you actually change your relationship with a belief?
It starts by noticing where that belief shows up in your life and how it affects you emotionally. Let's say you're struggling with the belief, I'm not worthy of love.
That's a tough one. A lot of people struggle with that.
Absolutely. So you might start by simply acknowledging the belief's presence. You might say to yourself, there's that familiar feeling of unworthiness again. I see you.
Instead of trying to push it away or pretend it's not there, you're creating space for it.
Exactly. And as you create that space, you can start to explore it with curiosity. You might ask yourself, when did this belief first take root? What purpose did it serve at the time? Often these limiting beliefs developed as a way to protect us or make sense of the world when we were younger.
It's like they were doing their best to keep us safe, even if they're no longer serving us in the present moment.
Exactly. And as you explore the belief with compassion and an understanding, you might find that it starts to lose its grip on you. You're no longer so afraid of it or controlled by it.
It's like you're taking back your power, reclaiming your right to choose the beliefs that empower you. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious about something. We've talked a lot about techniques for shifting beliefs, but what about those times when it feels incredibly challenging to let go, even when we know a belief is holding us back? What advice do these notes offer for navigating those moments?
That's a great question, and it's something a lot of people struggle with. You see, there's another powerful concept woven throughout these notes that I think can offer some guidance. It's the idea of self-compassion. Are you ready to explore that?
Absolutely. Self-compassion is so essential. Let's dive in. So we're diving into the realm of self-compassion.
Right.
It's something we hear a lot about these days, but how does it actually play into this process of belief change? It feels like it would be easy to get down on ourselves when we're struggling to let go of beliefs that are no longer serving us.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to fall into that trap of self-criticism. But these notes emphasize that self-compassion is not about letting ourselves off the hook or ignoring the things we want to change. It's about recognizing that we are all works in progress, and we're all doing the best we can with what we have in each moment.
It's like offering ourselves the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend or loved one who is struggling.
Exactly. And when we approach ourselves with that kind of gentle understanding, it becomes easier to let go of judgment and embrace the process of change.
It's like that saying, progress, not perfection. We're all on a journey, and there will be bumps along the way.
Absolutely. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do when we're feeling stuck is to simply acknowledge the struggle with kindness. We might say to ourselves, this is hard and I'm feeling frustrated, but it's okay. I'm still worthy and I'm still capable of growth.
It's about shifting from a place of self-criticism to a place of self-support. It's like being our own best cheerleaders. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the incredible world of beliefs, what's the most important takeaway you hope listeners will walk away with today? What's the key to unlocking the transformative power of belief change?
You know, if there's one thing I hope listeners remember, it's that they have more power than they realize.
Yes.
Our beliefs are not set in stone. We have the ability to examine them, to challenge them, and ultimately to choose the beliefs that empower us to create the lives we desire and deserve.
It's about recognizing that we're not just passive recipients of our thoughts. We have the power to shape them, to mold them, and to create a belief system that supports our highest growth and fulfillment. That's incredibly empowering.
It is, and it all begins with awareness. By simply paying attention to our thoughts, to the stories we tell ourselves, we can start to identify the beliefs that are holding us back and those that are propelling us forward. It's a journey of self-discovery, and it's a journey worth taking.
So true. Well, on that inspiring note, it's time for us to surface from this deep dive into the amazing world of belief change. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, remember, you have the power to choose your beliefs, and in doing so, you have the power to shape your reality. We'll catch you on our next deep dive adventure.
Almost ready. Almost going.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be uncovering some fascinating insights into your mind, your patterns, how you can really, unlock that amazing potential that's maybe hidden just below the surface.
Yeah, it's like we're going backstage, behind the curtain, to look at those inner workings. Like you said, the why behind our thoughts, feelings, actions. It's exciting.
It really is. So to kick things off, get this, we've been digging through a bunch of sources, and one concept that keeps popping up are these, get this, mirror laws. Basically, it's this idea that the things that really bug us about other people, or even those strengths we admire, maybe they're actually telling us something about ourselves.
It's true. And the best part is this isn't about judging others, right? It's about self-discovery. Like we're holding up a mirror, but to our own strengths and, dare I say, our shadows.
Okay, yeah, that's giving me chills. So let me see if I'm getting this right. If I'm constantly frustrated by someone, let's say they're always late, maybe that means, well, deep down I need to work on my own patience.
Precisely. Or here's another one. If you find yourself drawn to someone's confidence, charisma, maybe it's a reflection of that same potential within you just waiting to be unleashed.
Wow, I love that. So it's like those people, we admire, they're like walking, talking billboards, but the billboards are advertising qualities we might not even realize we have. This is exciting. But okay, there's always a but, right? Our sources also talk about these, get this, psychological blueprints that we develop super early, like way back.
Right, like this invisible script. It's often written in our childhood, and it's fascinating how much it influences how we navigate the world.
So just to be clear, we're saying that our childhood experiences, especially those with family, can actually shape our beliefs and even our behaviors years and years later. So for example, if someone grew up with a parent who's constantly criticizing them, they might internalize that voice and then as an adult become overly self-critical.
Exactly. And that's where things can get, a little tricky, because we might actually unconsciously recreate those dynamics, those familiar dynamics from our past in our adult relationships. Even if, and this is key, even if those patterns aren't really serving us well anymore.
It's like that example from one of the sources, right? The woman who kept finding herself drawn to partners who were emotionally unavailable, and then bam, it turns out it was mirroring a pattern from her relationship with her father, right?
It's kind of incredible when you think about it. These early experiences, they can leave such a lasting imprint. But, and here's the good part, here's the empowering part. When we become aware of these patterns, it's like the first step to breaking free. We're not talking about blaming our pasts, not at all. This is about understanding how it might be impacting our present.
So we're carrying around these blueprints, right? Sometimes we bump into the same old patterns and we don't even realize it. What's really cool though is what we can do about it. Our sources say, once we know what the blueprints are, we can actually rewrite them.
That's right. We're not stuck repeating the past. We have choices. We can challenge these old beliefs that hold them back. You know the ones.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, we've all got those negative thoughts, right? Like, I'm not good enough or I'll never actually succeed. It's like, they're just there.
It's like they become these self-fulfilling prophecies, right? If you believe you can't do it, you probably won't even try.
That's so true. And some of the sources described it in a really interesting way. They talked about being trapped in this prison, but we built it ourselves, or we're wearing blinders, so we literally can't see our own potential. It's kind of dramatic, but it makes sense.
Totally. But the good news is we can take the blinders off. We just have to remember these beliefs are just thoughts. They're not actually the truth. You know what I mean?
For sure. But how do we actually do that? Okay, yeah, it's a limiting belief. Okay, great. How do you really shift something that's so deeply ingrained in your thinking? It's got to be tough, right?
It definitely takes effort, but it's possible. One technique that really resonated with me from the sources was this. Put those negative thoughts on trial. Seriously. Like, ask yourself, is this even true? What evidence do I have?
I love that. Cross-examining your own inner critic.
Exactly. Often when you really look at those negative thoughts, what do you find? They're usually based on old stuff, fears, assumptions, old stories that might not even be true anymore.
We've outgrown those stories, but they just won't leave us alone. So, okay, let's say we're challenging these beliefs, rewriting the old scripts. What happens next? How does that actually unlock our potential?
It's kind of magical. It creates space. Now we can be our authentic selves, embrace our strengths, go after what we want with confidence.
This is giving me chills again. We're shedding those old layers, stepping into, the light. And the sources talk about it as self-discovery, but it's more than that, right? It's self-creation. We're not just figuring out who we are, but who we can be, who we're capable of becoming. So much to think about. We're creating ourselves. That's a powerful thought. But how do we actually do it? How do we start living from this place of, authenticity, living up to our potential? What are the steps?
Well, one of the sources talked about this idea of, it's called reframing. Basically, you take those negative thoughts we were talking about and you make a conscious choice to see them differently.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of reframing, but can you give me like a real example?
Yeah.
How would you actually use it?
Sure. Let's say you're dealing with a fear of failure, which a lot of us do, right? So instead of letting it totally paralyze you, you could try reframing it. Think of it as a chance to learn and grow.
It's like instead of focusing on the negative, you're looking for the good, kind of. What's the opportunity here?
Exactly. And another big part of this whole self-creation journey, something our sources really emphasize, is self-compassion.
Oh, self-compassion, yeah. I mean, we hear that a lot these days, but what does that actually mean? And how does it, like, fit into all of this?
It's simple, really. Just treat yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend. We're often so much harder on ourselves than anyone else, you know?
Totally.
That's okay.
It's like we're our own worst critic sometimes. Actually, a lot of the time. But so, less criticism, more compassion. How does that help?
Think about it. Self-criticism, that's what usually keeps us stuck. But when you're compassionate with yourself, you're basically saying it's okay to mess up. It's okay to not be perfect. It gives you the space to grow and change.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to, I don't know, be human, I guess.
Let's make one
Which is
for-
important because we're not perfect, right? So we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. It's been, wow, really thought-provoking. What's the one thing, if you had to pick, that you want our listeners to really take away from all of this?
You are not powerless. You have the power to create the life you want, a life you really desire. It starts with understanding that blueprint we talked about, then challenging those limiting beliefs and never forgetting to be kind to yourself along the way.
It's a journey, for sure.
Yeah.
And I love that we have the
Turn it
power.
around. That was good ending. That was a
So good.
really decent ending.
Well, that's about it for today's deep dive. We hope this is giving you some really interesting things to think about, maybe even inspired you to, start creating that blueprint for the life you truly want. Thanks for listening, everyone.